Before we go any further, let's get one thing straight. This story is not about an arrest, a charge, or a courtroom verdict. This is about power, proximity, and what happens when the public starts asking questions the industry spent decades avoiding. And the reason this moment feels so explosive is because Jay-Z has spent his entire career staying 10 steps ahead of moments like this, until now. Because for the first time, the narrative isn't being controlled by labels, press releases, or carefully placed interviews. It's being driven by public memory, old footage, old interviews, old comments that suddenly don't sound like jokes anymore. And no one has been better at weaponizing memory than 50 Cent. Let's rewind. Jay-Z and Diddy came up in the same era, but they played very different games. Diddy was always the visible king. Parties, cameras, celebrities, champagne, excess. Jay-Z was quieter. He watched. He studied. He positioned himself as the businessman who outgrew the chaos. That contrast is important, because while Diddy built a world where everyone wanted access, Jay-Z built a world where access went through him. Same rooms, same circles, different strategies. And that's why, when Diddy's world started collapsing publicly, the conversation didn't stop at him. People naturally started asking, who else was in those rooms? Who else benefited from that ecosystem? Those questions are uncomfortable, especially for someone like Jay-Z, whose brand is precision, distance, and control. Now enter 50 Cent. 50 has always existed outside the traditional industry approval system. He doesn't need radio. He doesn't need labels. He doesn't need favors. That independence gives him a freedom most artists never have. The freedom to say things without worrying about being cut off. And for over a decade, he's been saying the same thing in different ways. The industry protects its biggest power players. Sometimes he said it jokingly, sometimes sarcastically, sometimes brutally, but the message never changed. When he mocked Diddy, people laughed. When he hinted at Jay-Z's influence, people said he was reaching. But now, with Diddy under intense scrutiny, those old comments are being replayed in a completely different context. And that's the part Jay-Z allegedly hates the most. Because Jay-Z didn't say anything wrong. He didn't do anything publicly incriminating. He didn't attach himself to scandals. But he also didn't exist outside the system. And when the system gets questioned, everyone inside it feels pressure. What makes this situation feel like Jay-Z losing it isn't a public meltdown. It's the breakdown of narrative insulation. Jay-Z is used to being the guy no one drags into mess, the one who stays untouched while others fall, the one who always lands clean. But now, people aren't dragging him, they're connecting dots. And in the modern internet era, dots don't need proof to create discussion. They just need visibility. That's dangerous territory for someone whose power relies on perception. Now let's talk about why 50 Cent specifically is such a problem for Jay-Z. Because 50 doesn't argue emotionally. He doesn't rant. He doesn't accuse. He frames. He lets the audience do the work. He'll post a clip. He'll resurface an interview. He'll laugh and say, I'm just asking questions. And suddenly, millions of people are asking those same questions. That tactic is far more threatening than a direct attack, because Jay-Z can respond to an accusation. He can't respond to a conversation without elevating it. And silence, for once, isn't stopping the conversation. Another layer here is timing. If 50 had pushed this narrative 10 years ago, it wouldn't have landed. The industry was too consolidated. Media was too centralized. Platforms weren't built for long-form breakdowns and independent analysis. Now, the gatekeepers don't control distribution anymore. YouTube, TikTok, podcasts. This is where narratives are shaped now. And those spaces thrive on re-examining history. That's why this feels like an inflection point. Not because Jay-Z is suddenly vulnerable, but because the system that protected him isn't as airtight as it used to be. And then there's Beyonce. Beyonce changes everything. Because Beyonce isn't just part of Jay-Z's brand, she's the shield. She represents artistry, empowerment, cultural excellence. Criticizing Jay-Z is one thing. Being perceived as pulling Beyonce into controversy is another. 50 understands this dynamic perfectly. Notice how careful he is. He doesn't attack Beyonce directly. He doesn't insult her. He doesn't question her talent. He questions structures. He questions power couples. He questions untouchable brands. And again, the audience fills in the blanks. That's what makes this so effective and so frustrating for the people being discussed, because nothing he's saying is technically defamatory, but it's deeply uncomfortable. Now let's talk about why Jay-Z's alleged frustration makes sense strategically. Jay-Z's entire career has been about control of positioning. From Rockefeller to Roc Nation, he's mastered the art of being adjacent to everything while responsible for nothing. That's not an insult, that's business genius. But genius only works when the public isn't questioning the boardroom. And now, people are questioning the boardroom. They're asking how power operates, who gets protected, who gets sacrificed. And once those questions start, silence stops being neutral. That's why industry insiders say Jay-Z is furious, not publicly, but privately. Because this isn't a fire he can put out with a statement. The more he says, the bigger it gets. The less he says, the more speculation grows. That's a trap. And 50 knows it. This is why their dynamic feels so tense right now. It's not beef, it's pressure. 50 is applying pressure without ever touching Jay-Z directly. And that's why this moment feels different from every other rumor cycle we've seen. Because this time, the audience is doing the work. They're revisiting old interviews. They're rewatching footage. They're connecting dots that were always there but never discussed openly. And once public memory wakes up, it doesn't go back to sleep. So the real question isn't whether Jay-Z lost it. The real question is this: what happens when the most powerful figure in hip-hop can no longer fully control how history is interpreted? Because power doesn't disappear overnight, it erodes. And erosion always starts with conversation. That's where we are right now. And here's where the conversation gets even more uncomfortable for someone like Jay-Z. Because once the public starts questioning systems, they stop caring about individual intent. That's the part most people miss. This isn't about whether Jay-Z personally did something wrong. It's about whether he was part of a structure that allowed certain things to happen, and whether that structure protected its most powerful members while others took the fall. In every industry, there's a difference between being guilty and being insulated, and Jay-Z mastered insulation. For decades, he's positioned himself as the grown man of hip-hop, the one who survived the chaos, avoided scandal, and transitioned into ownership while others burned out. That image didn't happen by accident. It was carefully built through silence, timing, and selective visibility. You rarely see Jay-Z reacting in real time. You rarely see him clapping back. You rarely see him emotional. That's control. But control works best when the audience accepts the framing without questioning it. What 50 Cent has done, intentionally or not, is disrupt that acceptance. Because when Diddy's situation exploded, it shattered the illusion that power equals immunity. And once that illusion cracks, people start scanning the entire landscape for similar patterns. That's when Jay-Z enters the frame. Not because of a specific allegation, but because of proximity to power. Let's be real for a second. Jay-Z and Diddy didn't just coexist. They operated at the same tier. Same private events, same elite circles, same influence over culture, media, and opportunity. Not at a verdict, not at a conclusion, but at a moment where silence no longer guarantees safety. And if 50 keeps pushing this angle, subtly, strategically, relentlessly, the pressure won't come from him. It'll come from the audience. And that's the one force no mogul ever fully controls. In any other context, that wouldn't matter. But when one figure is exposed for abusing power, everyone around them gets re-examined. Not for guilt, but for awareness. And awareness is a dangerous word. Because if you were aware and stayed silent, people start asking why. That's the question 50 never asks directly, but always implies. And Jay-Z knows that implication carries weight. Another reason this hits so hard is because Jay-Z represents something bigger than himself. He represents the success story, from the Marcy projects to the boardroom, from hustler to billionaire, from rapper to cultural architect. That narrative is sacred to a lot of people. So when someone like 50 even hints that the path to that level of success might involve compromise, silence, or proximity to questionable behavior, it threatens more than one man's reputation. It threatens the myth, and people defend myths fiercely. That's why reactions to this situation feel so polarized. Some people say, Jay-Z has nothing to do with this. Others say, you don't get that powerful without knowing things. Both can be true at the same time, and that's what makes this moment so volatile. 50 Cent thrives in gray areas like this. He understands that the most powerful accusations are the ones that don't need proof, because they don't claim facts. They question structures. And once people start questioning structures, they don't stop at one name. That's why this feels like Jay-Z losing it, even without a visible reaction, because the conversation has moved beyond individuals. It's about how the industry really works. Let's talk about leverage for a moment. Jay-Z's power has never just been about music. It's about networks, lawyers, partnerships, access, the ability to open doors or quietly close them. That kind of power doesn't require threats. It doesn't require confrontation. It works through incentives and silence. 50 Cent, on the other hand, built his power through independence and public conflict. He doesn't rely on being invited into rooms. He builds his own rooms. Those are two fundamentally different power models. And right now, the independent model is winning the narrative war. Because independence doesn't need permission to speak. This is why Jay-Z can't simply respond to 50. What would he even say? I wasn't involved? No one accused him directly. I didn't know? That opens more questions. Stop speculating? That makes it louder. So tell me what you think. Is 50 exposing uncomfortable truths about industry power? Is Jay-Z unfairly caught in someone else's collapse? Or is this simply what happens when systems built on silence finally face scrutiny? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Because whether people like it or not, this conversation isn't going away, and neither is the pressure. Anyway, this concludes today's video. Be sure to subscribe to LoafTube for future celebrity videos, and turn on that post notification bell so you don't miss out on any future uploads. Until then, see you in the next one.